My name is Sinéad O'Brien and I am the Clinic Liaison Officer for Muscular Dystrophy Ireland. My aim is to be at a high percentage of all clinics within Dublin. I will be available both before and after your appointment to answer any questions you may have or offer any practical support you may need going forward. I can link you in with a support worker within your region who will further help you on this journey. A small bit of advice I can give you is to prepare any questions you have prior to meeting your consultant. It can be very daunting meeting the consultant team for the very first time, but don't worry, MDI will be there to support you every step of the way.
Hi, my name is Niamh O'Connor. I'm an occupational therapist in the Neuromuscular service at Children's Health Ireland in Tallaght and Temple Street. And today I'll be explaining a little bit about the transition from children's services to adult health services.
That's great, Niamh. Could you explain a little what we mean by the term transition?
There are lots of ways to explain transition. However, one way of thinking about it is the planned and purposeful movement of young people from children's health services to adult services.
So it involves moving from children's to adult health services. How do paediatric and adult services differ from one another?
There's an important difference between children's health services and adult health services. In children's health services, it is family-centred and has a developmental focus. So we look at trying to meet the children where they're at. In adult services, they're focused on the person's autonomy, so being able to do things for themselves and being as independent as possible. It's a big change, and that's why transition and planning for it is so important.
Can you tell us a little of what is involved in the actual process of transition?
The process for transition is usually individual to each young person and their family and depends on their individual needs. The children's team will discuss with families and the young person when transition should commence and contact should be made with adult services. Usually, depending upon each individual team, the contact is made between the ages of 16 and 18. The first step of that is a referral letter. The referral letter may be in the form of a multidisciplinary referral. So that's one letter to multiple professionals such as adult neurology, respiratory, endocrinology, or it may be one consultant contacts their counterpart. So paediatric neurology contacts adult neurology.
And what can a young person expect about how and when their appointments may happen, Niamh?
So there are waiting lists in adult services, but you can expect an appointment anytime after the referral letter has been sent to adult services. Sometimes you will get different appointments for different dates with different professionals. So for example, you may get an appointment with adult neurology on one date and then a separate appointment for adult respiratory on another date. This can be different to what you've experienced in the children's services.
What can parents do to help the young person prepare for the move to adult services?
One important aspect that a parent can do is to think about early preparation and planning. This can be a gradual process and can start from an early age, so from the age of 11 onwards. It very much depends on the young person's needs and the family's needs, so it may happen at a later time, but it's useful to think about as early as possible. In thinking about early planning and preparation, you can use opportune moments at home. So to talk about the young person's condition, and so they get to know a little bit more about that and also about their individual care needs. That can then develop on to talking about other life skills. So, for example, emotional supports, education, sexual health, and independent living skills. These are all really important things to discuss so that the young person is well prepared for transition. If you have any questions or concerns, or you would like a little bit of help in early planning, the paediatric teams will be more than happy to help you with that.
And Niamh, what about, do you have any advice or tips for young people in how they can support themselves in this big change from children's to adult health services?
Yes, so we really like to encourage ownership and control over your own needs and your care. And so one thing that we would like to encourage is for young people to ask questions themselves. So it might be as the young person is beginning to learn about their condition a little bit more at home, that they prepare some questions for the paediatric team. We're more than happy to help them with that. And if they would like, you can contact the team before you have your appointment and arrange to ask those questions. And also you can contact the team if you want to have a little bit of time alone with the team without your parent, so that you can have conversations and practice conversations one-on-one with your team.
That's great, thank you.
It's also really helpful for parents to consider pitching the information at their child's level. So using the language they will understand, and you may also use things like visuals or pictures that might help them understand things about their condition and their needs, just so it helps in terms of their development of understanding. And also what I'd like to say to parents and young people is, if they have any questions, then the children's neuromuscular teams are more than happy to sit down and have a chat or discuss planning for transition, or indeed any steps of the transition. So please do ask.
Matthew, how was your transition from paediatric to adult health services?
My transition between the two services was a bit rocky at times. For context, a lot of my transition happened when I was 17 in 2019. So leading on to the next few years, when I was 18, 19, it was during the pandemic, but I can give an overview of how it was. For me, I haven't really seen my nurse or my OT in a while. For me, it was a bit rocky, but overall, it's been good. Whenever I've asked the nurse for stuff, they've given me it. But I know everyone has different adult health services. But for me, I prefer the adult services over the child services. It was good. I now don't have to go to as many clinics and different hospitals as I used to. So it was good at times, but rocky in sometimes.
Thank you. And did you experience any other challenges?
Some of the challenges I experienced while in the adult and moving was a lot of my doctors were changing. So I didn't know a lot of the new faces, or I got put on a few different medications. So it was difficult to try and learn who my new doctors were, how to get to know them, and how to navigate, the adult health services. For me, it was pretty difficult, but with the help of my mom, she would ring places for me if I was too nervous, or, just for me, I always fight for myself. So I always make sure I have the information. But I didn't really have many difficulties, not many big things. The only thing that was a bit rocky was trying to put on certain medications for nerve pain and stuff like that. But that's a whole different other story. But for me, there was a few difficulties, but I think I dealt with them pretty well.
Excellent. Great. And would you have any advice or tips for parents or guardians of other young people?
For the parents and guardians, I would say make sure your child or the person you're taking care of is independent in themselves, but make sure you're supporting them. If they need you to ring a doctor, ring the doctor. If they need you to email for them, email for them. But for me, a lot of parents worry about moving from the children's health service to the adult health service. I know it's scary when your kid is growing up and they're moving services, but the best way for you to support them is to make sure they have the information and to make sure they learn how to fight for themselves. Because if you don't teach your kid how to fight for themselves, they're not going to get the best care they can. To get the best care, you need to fight for it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Looking back on it all, do you have any advice or tips that you'd like to offer other young people? What would help them prepare for the transition?
My one piece of advice would be to have information, to have your doctors and secretaries' emails and phone numbers to make sure you can contact them whenever you need. Don't be afraid to ring up the secretary and be like, I have this appointment, I need it now, or why hasn't the doctor signed my letter yet? Some simple problems. You might think you're nagging them, but you have to fight for yourself to get the support you need. If you have an issue, make sure you ring the complaints department. They will always help you. Young adults just need to know how to fight for themselves. Have your information. Information is your biggest weapon or your biggest resource. If you have an issue, it can mostly be sorted if you have the information. And don't forget to fight for yourself, because in this world, only you will fight for yourself. There might be some people helping you, but if you don't fight for yourself, not much will happen. But make sure you have that information. And a piece of advice for me is always have your medication written down in your phone. This is a little tip.
Excellent.
If you're moving, because 7, 8, 9, 10 doctors will ask you for it, and you'll be like asking your parents, oh, what is my medication? They won't know. It's not their medication. So make sure you write down your medication. Because for me, I have to remember the names of them and the doses. Just overall, make sure you have that information. If you need any extra support, don't be afraid to reach out to your support worker. They are always happy to help. And for me, MDI has always been a huge resource to help me fight for the support I need.
Thank you very much, Matthew.
Thank you very much for having me.
Noeleen, how was your experience of the transition from paediatric to adult health services?
To be honest with you, it was kind of a bit of a minefield, very daunting to begin with, because you were so used to kind of you being in control, where when they become an adult and you move into adult services, you know, you're kind of in the background then, because the consultants and doctors kind of speak directly to, in my case, directly to Kevin. So you did feel kind of that, I wouldn't say the word control, but you know, you were kind of being removed out of the picture, so to speak. Our experience kind of in, Kevin attended Our Lady's Hospital, and they were absolutely fantastic, to the point that if we had an issue or, you know, we're concerned about something, we could email the consultant and he would email us back or phone us, which was absolutely brilliant. Where in adult services, you didn't have that connection. So we found that a bit daunting, to be honest.
Sure, sure. And did you experience any other challenges that you can think of within it all?
It's just all different. Like, you've gone from having so many appointments to appointments being, I wouldn't say non-existent, but you might have 1 or 2 a year, as opposed you at that, you know, when you're in child services, you had 1 or 2 a week. Okay. So I think it was just a huge transition, in the sense that you just didn't feel that you had the same level of support that you did in child services.
Okay.
So that's really...
Looking back on it all, do you have any advice or tips that you'd like to offer parents or guardians?
I suppose the biggest thing is you know, you don't have the same level of appointments and you don't have the same level of support. So I suppose it's be prepared for that, because it is a big shock to the system. Other than that, I don't know, unless hospitals are going to change their policies and, you know, make transition more easier for people, you know. But I think the biggest tip I would have is to get in contact with Muscular Dystrophy Ireland, use the family support services that are there, and also the liaison person that does be in the clinics, because they're the ones that are there on a daily basis. They deal with the consultants, and they would be the best people to advise you on how to make the best transition.
Great. Great, thank you. And do you have any advice or tips for young people? Like what would help them prepare for the transition, do you think?
I suppose just be prepared that, you know, it is a different setting. It's okay, it's just another hospital. So, you know, don't be worried, don't be concerned. Maybe if you are going to appointments, write down questions, because from kind of when you transition to adult services, it's you that the consultants deal with and not your parents anymore. So if you don't feel comfortable asking the questions, at least if you have them wrote down, you can give the consultant the list of questions or get one of your parents to read out the questions. The other thing is, if you do have to have a procedure or any sort of treatment or anything, don't be afraid to say that you want time to think about, you know, things. You don't have to give the answer on the day. You can go home and think about it.
Excellent. Thank you, Noeleen.